The other school of thought is to keep track of the transactional changes. So you take like a snapshot, if you will. Probably the closest analogy is like a snapshot. If I need to roll back, we roll back to the changes to the snapshot that we just took. Your snapshots get consolidated and swooped in, and you keep a number of snapshots, whatever that is.
That sounds to me like Tumbleweed.
Yeah, Tumbleweed definitely hands them out that way, but there are some immutable ones that like keep track of your system. Tumbleweed hands out updates that way, but it's not transactional. It's not necessarily transactional on your system. Does that make sense? Certain things are locked in from changing.
Right, and that's what makes it immutable.
That's
you can't
the immutable
change those
part.
things.
Whereas Tumbleweed is not immutable. You can sideload and compile your own whatever. There's a lot more faffery you can do. Coming up in this episode, Immutability is Confusing. Going the Wrong Way. Reverb Focus, Hardware Focus, and Gentoo Focus. Welcome to Linux User Space. I'm Dan.
And I'm Leo.
So Leo, we've entered into this exploration into yet another immutable operating system. It's a bit of a thing to get your head wrapped around, no?
I've heard this immutability word a bunch of times, but when different people say it, they mean different things.
Right.
And that's what makes it hard. What? I don't even know what it means. I think I know what it means. I think we're going to talk about what we know what it means. We'll learn more.
We're by no means experts, but there's parts of your operating system that even if you faff with them, when you go to reboot or whatever, it'll just go back to the way it was. Or also when you do updates, they'll get basically sideloaded and then you'll boot into that later on. So there's a couple of different schools of thoughts. In another way, it's also considered to be like a version control system. You know, essentially you can pick the path, the breadcrumbs. You can follow the breadcrumbs back to where you were.
I'd been following Vanilla OS with a whole lot of interest because I like the idea of, as we talked about on the Debian episode, I like the idea of having kind of a distro box style situation where I can pull software from absolutely anywhere, regardless of the base that I'm on. And that is really enticing to me. In some Linux distros, I don't like to feel trapped. And most of the Ubuntus have gotten away with this by having PPAs, and those got really popular, so you can get some software, but you're still, you would still have the AUR folks saying, you can't get this software though. And, but distro boxes kind of close the gap on a lot of that. But the other thing about Vanilla OS is that it does this AB style of immutability. Here's how I think it works, and the way that I've explained it, probably wrongly, privately, is it works a lot like the phone operating systems.
Oh, for sure.
Where you download the whole thing. So during an update, you download all of it, and that is just the new system. You splat that where you would boot into the system, and the other one goes on the back burner just in case something goes wrong, and you try to boot. You boot into the new one, and if that works, cool. Now you have a backup just in case. But if it does not work, the one that was replaced gets put back, and then you boot back in. And likely you'll try again. You'll do some cleanup operation, figure out why it went wrong. But then you'll eventually try it again because you got to be on the latest and greatest eventually.
And it could be an update that happens on the upstream system. You know, they may have said we made a whoopsie, and issue another update, and then then you try that one and it works, right? So that
Right.
could be another alternative. Yeah, so basically your root and /usr, those things are read only. And so those are the things that, where all the updates gets, splatted out to. Your stuff is changeable and it is read write because it's yours, and the system things are read only. That's the takeaway.
I kind of ran into this situation on a Mac because apparently Mac OS does it very, very similarly to this. And I found out that this is the way that things were because when you're on a Mac and you're in the terminal and you want to make a change to a text file, my go-to is Nano. So I type in Nano. But on a Mac, it doesn't open Nano. Nano is linked to Pico or Pico.
Right.
I guess Pico is the correct pronunciation.
Yeah, Pine, whatever, right? That's where it started.
Yeah, and it goes to Pico. And that really rubs me the wrong way because Apple hasn't done anything to enable Control S, which is a very common save key combination. Right. And Nano didn't have it forever either.
No, it's like Control O, right?
Right. But eventually, I think new versions of Nano all support Control S to do the same thing as Control O.
Control O, that's like across the keyboard.
Right. And a lot of times that's open and it just makes my brain go weird. But I go through the process of in Homebrew, which is a lot like the AUR for Mac, and you can do it on Linux too. I downloaded Nano, I got it popped in where I wanted it to go, and then I tried making Nano the new Nano on Mac OS. But apparently you can't do that because Pico and the link to Pico is part of the immutable part of the system. So you can't make that change. And I say that. You can make that change, but you have to make immutable system level changes that will get wiped out the next time you run an update.
Right.
So it's just a never-ending cat and mouse game of, did we update? I got to go fix my Nano again. And so I gave up. I wasn't gonna do that. I suppose though, because I've seen a whole lot of conversation about it, that you aren't that locked into it with rpm-ostree in Fedora on Silverblue style systems.
Yeah, thankfully you're not, right? So rpm-ostree lets you layer things, and then that becomes your new snapshot, if you will. You can install things with RPM. You can remove things too with rpm-ostree. So like if for some reason you did not like the Firefox that came... I'm picking on this one for a reason. If you didn't like the Firefox that came with your, Fedora Silverblue, you can get rid of it. Now that becomes your new base layer. Basically everything minus Firefox. Or if you really got to have the fish shell or ZSH, for your shell,
right,
you have to layer those things on top of your base image, and that becomes your new base.
And so for a tinkerer, this style of immutability is head and shoulders above the macOS style of immutability, because you can still go in and make changes that are persistent,
right?
And you're not locked into, this is what Apple says, so this is how you're going to do it,
right? Obviously, the preferred method to add applications, especially, specifically, GUI applications, is going to be using a Flatpak, right? That's the one they promote the most, and it just kind of, that's the method they give you. Layering is like a little further down if you absolutely have to and can't get it another way. Layering would be something you could do, and like I think if I'm remembering the list well, app image is probably like the last thing. If you can't find it one of the other two ways, then you're going to install it with like an app image or something.
So Thunderbird was a early app that I added in, and when I found it in the GNOME Software Center, I found it. It was defaulting to installing it from Fedora, which I would assume.
Well, so you got to remember, Fedora has their own flat
Oh, so it would have been a flat
repository.
pack too.
Probably. Yeah, no, it
Because
seems very likely that it
I
was.
swapped that to FlatHub real fast because I knew they had the 115 Supernova, which is something that we didn't cover on the show, but I'm very excited about. I'm super, super stoked about Supernova on Thunderbird. You maybe we'll re-app focus it or something like that, but app focus has changed.
A little bit for a little while. Yeah.
Stay tuned.
Absolutely.
Lots of apps, just not like before.
So yeah, no,
Okay,
it probably
that makes sense.
was, and if you have both repositories, installed or whatever, available, I think you can flip between them. I don't know, I don't use GNOME software very much, but I think you can specify where you're pulling that from. I think.
Cool. I'll have to look into Firefox because Firefox was automatically there, obviously, because it's Fedora and all that.
That's on the base image, so that's not a flat pack there. Yeah, so that's in the base.
Anything on the base. Oh, see, now this is why I like that we're talking about it like this now, because there's so much that I don't know when it comes to how this stuff works, and over the next couple of weeks, between now and the next episode.
I'm not an expert, but I know a thing.
We still won't be experts by the end of it all, but I think we'll know a whole lot more about it. Okay, so I think I know what you were talking about with the whole Firefox thing.
Yeah.
So the Firefox from FlatHub does have those things built in, right? Like the H264
I think it does. I'm not 100% of that, but I can see why
we'll report back.
The one that's on the base image, pretty sure does not. So if there's one that you may want to get rid of, that might be it. The other thing is, I think you can go at it another approach, and you can add the extra H264 stuff, add it to your base image, and go that route too. So I think there are a couple of options from what I know, but I haven't experimented with it myself.
A lot of the H264 stuff, because it's not free and open source software, is going to come from RPM Fusion.
Is possible to add other repositories. That's also kind of frowned upon too. So I don't know.
Okay, all right. So they're not going to restrict you like Apple, but they're going to look at you weird as if they were.
Probably. I don't know. Ultimately, it's Linux. You got your choice. You can go the route you want to go. It's just they're going to give you some guidance as far as what they think is the best practice. So, I mean, if you're new to it, it's probably not a bad idea to follow the best practice guidelines.
Oh, and I agree with that. That's totally cool. But there is, just like, Dev1 exists and anti-systemd folks exist.
Oh, absolutely.
Right. Like there is going to be a vocal minority of people that this is not the way that we should be moving, the way that we should be moving. And this is going to kill Linux and all of that kind of stuff. So I don't know though. I'm not nearly in any way, shape, or form that pessimistic about this. I like the way that this is going because it does kind of give you a bit of a guarantee of boot stability, if nothing else, so that you're never stuck in a situation where your computer just won't boot up. Right? It just boots up in the old version, which is cool. I'm totally on board with that.
Yeah, and then like if it's your own fault because you decided to layer some package on there that wasn't
it's a safety catch.
Yeah, no, like if you decided to do that and shoot yourself in the foot, you can recover from that. So that's pretty great.
I'm super stoked about that. This is actually something that I'm really kind of excited about. I can see why there are folks out there right now that this is the new way. This is the future of Linux. This is why and how it's going to be. Just give it 5 more years and you won't have many traditional Linuxes out. Okay, we're running Gentoo out here. So the traditional Linux will live on forever. But, the stuff that people might buy off the shelf won't be a Gentoo. It will be some kind of possibly an immutable system like this.
Well, hey, guess what? Newsflash. The most popular handheld Linux device that's out there right now, that works that way. And it runs Arch, and it does the same thing. So it downloads,
oh my gosh.
It's immutable, right? You can't mess with it. You can layer on some stuff, potentially, if you wanted to.
This is the kind of thing remember, it wasn't even a year ago, I don't think. Remember the grub thing in Arch, where if you weren't paying very close attention to the changes that were coming down, you were going to get bit by this, and it was an almost unrecoverable kind of thing. And even if you could recover, rolling back was still the better choice. But if you didn't have a way to roll back,
Right.
then, you were really kind of in a pickle for a little while. So I all that to say, Steam has one. Valve has one.
Yeah.
Are there other Arch-based immutable systems?
Right, I forgot Blend had switched bases, right? So
Yeah.
Blend is Arch now. Yeah.
Yeah. So there is another option. And I think that is the kind of thing that I would need to feel comfortable running an Arch. Like truly and every day, and really running an Arch for good.
Right.
I would need ButterFS is great. The snapshots are great. I think that's probably the baseline. But I think having the AB immutability and being able to just say, automatically rolling you back to the last known working state, that is probably the last thing I would need to say, yeah, you know what? Okay, every day it's totally fine. I can totally do something like that. And then being a curmudgeon like I am, I'd probably just slap cinnamon back on it too.
It's something we talked about when we did Garuda, right? Because Garuda comes out of the gate with ButterFS, and it does those snapshot things, and you're able to select those in
and that's huge, man.
On boot. It is huge. And because it doesn't matter which system you're running, they all eventually have some potential for problems. And especially if you're mucking around with things. Like, I mean, if you're adding and removing and doing this, that, the other thing, beyond just updating, any one of those could mess things up. So being able to recover, there are a lot of ways to recover. You don't have to do the snapshot thing necessarily just to recover, right? We've all gone through different gyrations to, that's what backups are about, right? There's different ways to get back to square one, but some of it is about how long and what the time to recover is, more than just the ability to recover, because
it's why I really appreciated TG Tech and his time shift, and then Linux Mint eventually took that over.
Right.
And it's why I love that so much. I'm glad a way to recover from catastrophic failure exists. And now we have immutable systems that are, you can't touch these parts because, if you break these parts will make your life very uncool.
They break you.
Yeah, exactly. And then now we have the AB thing, which is just, I think, the next step toward having just really stable systems that you don't have to worry too much about. You can do your routine maintenance on them and not think about it too much. And if something breaks, oh well, move to the previous one and then try it again.
So yeah, it increases the it makes a better user experience, and it increases the ability to recover in a more timely fashion. So it addresses all of those things pretty nicely.
Dan, I don't think we've talked about it. We said we were going to do a Silverblue something, a Fedora Silverblue immutable something, but I don't think we ever revealed which ones we were going to do.
Nope.
So what did you land on?
So I landed on Parisi. I think that's how we say this. Okay. It is the Sway immutable variety, and it's an official one, and so that's the one I've settled on, is the one that's Sway, which Sway is i3 but Wayland.
There it is. Okay, yes. Very cool. So I decided to go way off the beaten path. My intention is to really see if the immutable thing works. And I'm now running experimental software.
Nice.
We're just gonna go down that path, man. And so there's a side project that is not an official Fedora Silverblue something. It is called Sodalite, and it runs the Pantheon desktop, which I know on more than one episode I have sung the praises of the Pantheon desktop or just elementary OS in general.
Right,
I
right.
love the way that I like their
It's
eye
nice. Yeah, it's nice.
for what things look like and how they should behave and all of that kind of thing. So the Fedora version of that, but on an immutable base, which means that running experimental software in my mind, right? This is my thought process. Running this type of experimental software on top of an immutable base like this means that I'm taking less risk? Question mark?
Well, you started with GNOME?
I did. Yes, I started with the regular one. I started with the
like if for some reason the first time you switched, you could switch back, right?
Yeah, it didn't blow up. So I mean, it just straight up booted me into Pantheon. It looked and felt a whole lot like elementary OS, though I know the packages underneath are different. I know, so elementary OS isn't immutable, but
it seems safer then.
It is. It's a cool experience, man. I've kind of enjoyed it. Yeah, we're going to revisit this next episode. I'm really kind of excited where some of this stuff has taken us, and we might be a little more informed.
This program was made possible by YouTube, TILvids, and contributions to your LES station by patrons like you. Large topic, very controversial, gonna affect your web and not in a good way. Way back 2015, AMP, or Accelerated Mobile Pages, was a way for Google to cache web pages and make them available to the user quicker, but at a trade-off to privacy or, really, interacting with Google at all. And back in November of 2019, Google proposed web bundles, which made it more difficult to block ads and manipulate content on a web page. Think PDFs, not web pages. It ultimately died in February of this year. In December of 2021, Google weakened the power of extensions with Manifest v3 such that ad blockers are much less effective. Then, in May of 2022, first-party sets were introduced through the W3C by Google, which allowed different sites in or out of a single domain to communicate information about the user. The W3C decided to drop the idea in June, as there was no way to implement it without causing major upset with regards to privacy. The original Google post, April 25th timeframe on GitHub, has an explainer that says, from a group of Googlers. They put up the Web Environment Integrity Proposal. Its purpose is to allow web servers to evaluate the authenticity of the device and honest representation of the software stack and the traffic from the device. Offer an adversarially robust and long-term sustainable anti-abuse solution. Don't enable new cross-site user tracking capabilities through attestation. Continue to allow web browsers to browse the web without attestation.
That sounds kind of good. And when you get into the GitHub and actually read the introduction and the summary and how they plan to implement that, it does sound kind of good.
It's nice, no cross-site user tracking. That's a good thing, right? I mean, that's not like we've got extensions and stuff that help us mitigate that sort of thing.
And one of the main goals is to kind of cut down on inauthentic web clicks. But you get the feeling really early on that this particular proposal is about Google's bottom line.
It's about the money.
Yeah. I don't know if it's all about the money. And there could be genuine concern behind that, but why is that one of the very first concerns?
Well, I'll just throw this out there, right? So Google is often thought primarily as a technology company, But I feel like that is a misrepresentation of their actual strategy.
The technology is secondary.
They are primarily an advertising company. Yeah, so they're looking to sell you advertising, and they're using technology as the conduit to get it to you.
Right. I mean, it's why there are ads in Gmail. It's why they're upselling you in Drive, and why there's ads in Google searching, and
holy cow, are there ads in YouTube?
So this was back in April, and it didn't take too terribly long for everybody else to kind of figure out what's going on. And by everybody else, I mean Mozilla, Vivaldi, Brave, the EFF.
Yeah.
So Mozilla comes out on July 24th. And so to be clear, this is not necessarily a Google from up on high initiative. It
certainly doesn't seem that way. Yeah, but it seems like a proposal that is going to be pushed up that direction.
Right. It is internal. It is from Googlers. So we know that there is some interest there. So Mozilla is the first off the blocks to come out with, I hesitate to call it a rebuke, but I mean, yeah, kind of. In a positions article in GitHub, they say, Mozilla opposes this proposal because it contradicts our principles and vision for the web. Any browser, server, or publisher that implements common standards is automatically part of the web. The use cases listed depend on the ability to detect non-human traffic, which, as described, would likely obstruct many existing uses of the web, such as assistive technologies, automatic testing, and archiving, and search engine spiders. So before we go on to Vivaldi stuff, these are big issues, and one of the main things that comes out during a lot of these rebukes is that there aren't answers in the document yet to say how this type of attestation, this type of so I guess before we go on, basically what WEI or Web Environment Integrity is about is it is letting the Google Play Store, the Apple Store, whoever basically bless a browser or some other technology that allows you to connect to web things, internet things, and if and when they are blessed, then you are able to proceed. You're able to access the information that is at these URLs or at these places. And if you are not blessed, think F-Droid, think any other way to sideload applications, think Linux. If you are not blessed, then you cannot play. You cannot access. You cannot be there. And so this is why it's a big deal. This is technology that everybody uses. Now there are the haves and there are the have-nots.
And I want to go a step further here with that. A lot of people are thinking, oh, their web browser is not going to work. So like if I side-loaded Opera or Vivaldi onto my Android from, either by downloading it directly onto my phone or, through some other store, that won't work. That's not the only things that are touching the web. Please remember, because there are, what application do we use, especially on our mobile devices, that isn't designed to touch the web? And all of them are falling into this category as well. Not just your web surfing. Yeah.
Right, because the whole thing about this is that this proposal brings in a third party and a tester, someone that blesses the browser and says, yes, you can go to that website. And that attester has a public key that is available that you can say, all right, that attester is who I think they are. They have said that this particular software signed the way that it is signed can access my website. Therefore, okay, you can now see my content. And so while Vivaldi from the Play Store will work because the Play Store is the attester saying, yes, Vivaldi can go, doesn't mean that downloading Vivaldi by itself would work. Because if you're on Linux, Linux or the store that you got it from or the PPA or whatever would then be that attester. And did they go through the proper channels to become an attester with a public key that is verified by all of the other attesters that are there to make sure that everything is on the up and up? Yeah, I'm going to guess no.
Because you're probably going to have to pay money to do that, right?
Oh,
first
because
off.
it ain't free to check all this stuff.
Right. So that's one thing. But I feel this is like adding a layer of authentication. And so we're authenticating you or your thing to be able to have something that is intended to be open.
This is why I love Mozilla's statement on this. Any browser, server, or publisher that implements common standards is automatically part of the web, right? The standards have already been agreed on. HTTP works.
Yeah.
The consortium, right?
Yeah.
Which Google is a big part of, unfortunately.
But so is Mozilla and all of the other players.
The fact that we have already agreed on the way that these people can, anybody can access stuff on the web. Now that is being with this proposal would uproot all of that. Would say now we need to bring in a third party. Now we need to make sure that your browser is what we think it is and who it came from, and now you can access Tumblr or whatever you're trying to get access to.
Because all of those, even individual apps, are basically a browser that's going to some web page. Yeah,
exactly. If you've ever actually taken one of those one of the apps like Twitter or anything else and it went through one of the portals that tells you your user agent, it's just a browser.
Right.
It comes up as, in iOS it comes up as Safari.
Right.
Every single time. In Android it comes up as probably Chrome or some Chromium
I think
variant.
So, yes.
Yeah. So everything is going to have to be attested, has to be part of this blessed group of stuff. And so the next day, after the Mozilla statement, Vivaldi released a statement, and in it they said, it is also interesting to note that the first use case listed is about ensuring that interactions with ads are genuine. While this is not problematic on the surface, it certainly hints at the idea that Google is willing to use any means of bolstering its advertising platform, regardless of the potential harm to the users of the web. Now, pay special attention to this part of their statement. Will Linux be completely excluded from browsing the web, or will Canonical, the Ubuntu Canonical, become the decider by virtue of controlling the snaps package repositories? Who knows? But it's not looking good for Linux.
Shots fired in a couple of directions there, but yes.
So you could say, the more open Linux-y, standard-y, flat pack, flat hub thing, right. They kind of get to be controlling with what goes in. I mean, that's Mozilla though, so I guess not, right? Like
maybe not.
Mozilla decide, but
they're getting better about verifying things, right? They've come up with mechanisms. Flat Hub has come up with mechanisms to verify publishers and whatnot. So maybe they could do it too, in addition to a Snap repository. I don't know.
Right.
I'd like to think. I'd like to hope if I hope not, but I hope if this were to actually come true, it would be unfortunate. But I hope there's more than one attester.
Yeah, right. That isn't the Apple Store and the Google Play Store.
Yeah, it's got to be more
the Windows Store.
Yeah, it needs to be more. Yeah,
because those three are shoe-ins. Those three are the ones that are going to be the ones.
Absolutely.
But this may be the end of being able to run out and grab software from the internet and run it. That is internet connecting, and I don't know.
That makes me sad.
But Vivaldi's statement was the only one that explicitly called out Linux. I know there have been many Linux blogs and things like that talk about this, but Vivaldi, one of the people that are directly involved in part of this attestation, who have said that they are not going to support WEI, WEI.
Yeah.
Specifically calls it out, and it's a good point. So Brave came out on August 1st. They said, as with many of Google's recent changes and proposals regarding web environment integrity would move power away from users and toward large websites, including the websites Google itself runs. Though Brave uses Chromium, Brave users do not and will not include WEI. So another one on the train. Those are it, right? Like Firefox, Vivaldi, Brave. Right. I don't think Edge much cares. I don't think Microsoft much cares because as they are the arbiters of truth when it comes to secure boot.
Well, yeah, absolutely.
They don't care because they are a shoo-in. So
yeah, they'll have to
Edge,
be in the party. Yeah.
Right. They don't even have to do much. They just have to set up their infrastructure to talk to the attestation servers.
Well, listen, they can just flash some coin because that's what they've got. They can just do that.
Hey.
They'll just sign on. Here's my money. Shut up and take my money. Right? I mean, that'll be where that's at.
Exactly. Just scooch over. We're here too.
Yeah.
So then a week later, the EFF on August 8th added that Google is adding code to Chrome that will send tamper-proof information about your operating system and other software and share it with websites. Google says this will reduce ad fraud. In practice, it reduces your control over your own computer and is likely to mean that some websites will block access for everyone who's not on an approved operating system and browser. It also raises the barrier to entry for new browsers. So you kind of get maybe they have Linux in mind when they're writing this article.
I think they're just talking about any operating system, though, when you think about it, because, I mean, slap that old warranty sticker across whatever operating system you're running, and the one that says, no user serviceable parts are inside, and thou shalt not add on, anything. And so in order to get the case off of that, computer to add the RAM, you gotta slice open that sticker, and now you've voided your warranty by installing some piece of software that didn't come from the blessed place.
And I think the EFF goes a little further in their explanation of where their head's at when they start talking about user agent switching. Like we enjoy a whole lot of that. Vivaldi we just covered in the last browser watch, where Vivaldi is using agent switching shenanigans to allow their users to access Edge's Bing.
Yeah, the AI stuff, yeah.
Now, with this attestation, that wouldn't be possible. You now won't be able to say that my browser is this other browser, so you can get access to software that is not, it's not like it wouldn't work in the browser that you're using. It just says, oh, that user agent says Firefox, so no.
Right.
How about no? There's a whole new barrier of entry now to get in, and that's the last, at least of the reading that we've got in here in the show, of what the EFF is getting at. It raises the barrier to entry for new browsers. Think about GNOME Web.
Yep.
You think GNOME Web's going to be part of this?
I don't think so. A Falcon? How about that one? Yeah.
You think there's going to be a third-party attester just waiting and ready and raring to go to say, all right, you know what, y'all are attested. Let's go. Let's move on. Let's get back onto the open web. Yeah, I'm gonna guess not. So we're again, just have to stress it's a proposal and not anything that is about to happen. This is not Manifest v3.
Yeah,
Google
we don't want to instill too much fear here, but and there is some uncertainty, obviously, and doubt. I mean, yeah, that's applied. Don't read into this too much, like Leo said.
But when you get a statement from Firefox, you get a statement from Vivaldi, you get a statement from Brave, and they're all saying we will not implement this way.
Yeah.
Web in web environment. What is it?
No.
Web. What is that?
Web environment integrity.
And then the EFF puts the cherry on top and says these are all the things that is going to break if you do something like this.
Yeah, and so the initial announcement comes out in the end of April, and then boom, a bunch in May, in July.
Yeah, over the next 4 months, really.
Yeah, I mean, like everybody's just piling on at this point. Yeah, it's just coming in.
So, and what's funny is in the bit of history that kind of leads up to this is kind of what Google's been doing. We didn't even talk about Flock.
No, that's another one that we've got to check in on again, I guess, at some point.
Right? Yeah. Whatever came after Flock. Flock died.
It did.
Flock flopped, and then the next one,
replacement
the
for
cohorts
that.
one,
Right.
Yeah, is still kind of coming still.
I guess so.
Yeah, it's just a pattern with Google.
Essentially, WEI is like scary stuff. That's the long and short of it. I really hope that it doesn't come to fruition.
Yep.
For a lot of reasons, just a lot of reasons. I think it removes the openness, like we talked about, to the web, and open access to things that should be available in a lot of ways. Yeah.
Yep. And in that way, I'm glad Mozilla had their word first.
I am too.
Because I think it very succinctly puts the argument together.
Right.
The open web is the open web. There shouldn't be a third party deciding who can access and who can't.
You can catch these and all the great topics that we talk about as they unfold on our Lemmy instance, our subreddit, or our news channel on Discord.
I gotta say, just real quick, the Lemmy instance has dwarfed Reddit as far as subscribers go. So
I know, it's amazing. It is amazing.
Yeah, thanks for subscribing. Awesome.
Absolutely. I haven't had as much time to spend there as of late the last few days, but I always enjoy it when I go, and I learn some new things. So,
oh yeah,
it's good stuff. All right, up for a old segment, but newly renamed. I coined this the Reverb Focus because it's all about feedback.
It is. We're going to focus on reverberations. I just like the word reverb. It's really cool.
I think it's cool. I think it fits this segment. We've only got a couple, but we'll throw in the first one here real quick. From Lily. It says, "Here's a quick little message from Lily. Hello, Dan and Leo. I created a little post inspired by your podcast Debian episode. It lists the Debian releases accompanied by images of Toy Story characters that inspired those particular release code names. And I'll throw the link in the show notes. And when you scroll through, you can see them all the way from the beginning, Buzz and his picture, all the way down to the latest Bullseye. And below that is Sid breaking your toys." It says, "Nothing special or fancy, but it might be of interest to some folks. And thanks for a great podcast, Lily." Anyway, the pictorial representation was cool. I really liked it.
Yep. And if you go peruse a little bit, you'll see a lot of poetry, a lot of prose. So, yeah, if you're into that kind of thing, there's a lot to read through.
Next up, from Hacker to Foe, he's written in a couple times, and great stuff. It says, "Hey there, guys. Really enjoyed listening to the Debian project's history. Very, very well done. Loads of kudos." It says, "Sadly, Ian Murdoch's amazing life ended in tragic, unfortunate, unclear, and suspicious circumstances. And I don't want to, deny that. That is absolutely true. And we mostly didn't cover that because we ran out of time for the episode, because there was a whole lot of Debian history. And we didn't really want to get into the necessarily Ian history. And we don't know all of the circumstances and details because we weren't a part of that. So we didn't really want to add to any of the speculation of things and whatnot. That's not really our jam, if you will. That's more of a Dateline thing and something my wife would watch.
that is a mystery movie kind of situation.
Yeah. So what I can say is, please take care of yourself and seek help should you need it. I mean, that's the best thing I can say. And I'll add on to that a little bit that I didn't write in here. Our healthcare system here in the United States isn't necessarily always the greatest, so I can understand some frustration about getting the actual help you need. So, but please do reach out to someone if you need it. Anyway, he goes on and he says, "I've created a few useful gist related to Debian and sources.list files and Debian download links."
Yeah, they are really cool because I think a lot of times when you're trying to look for some Debian stuff, that website's not the best.
Right.
To find exactly what you need when you need it.
Right.
Some of that stuff can be buried, and there were quite a few times where I'm like, I know what I want, I don't know how to get there though.
Right. Absolutely.
So yeah.
And so he goes on, lastly, I'll encourage everyone to give back something in return to Dan and Leo for this amazing educational podcast, if their budget and means allow it. These guys absolutely deserve all the support one can possibly give. To Dan and Leo, can you consider adding Stripe as a possible payment? It has lower fees and is as good as PayPal, if not better. You guys can also consider receiving support via cryptocurrency, as it enables faster and cheaper international and cross-border transactions. It says, keep up the great work, and adios.
Interesting.
So we'll have to look at Stripe. I don't know that we had even really kind of thought about that one, but it's interesting.
Yeah, because I feel like Stripe would be more of a one-time kind of, here's a $5.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and it may. I have to look and see what like international possibilities are, because I know some of those things can get really bound up, like because they're very accessible for here in the United States, but I don't know about other countries being able to contribute there. So
right,
we want to make it possible for those folks too.
So you can always find all of the links and all of the things that we do at linuxuserspace.show. And you can always email us at contact@linuxuserspace.show.
In this community focus, I want to highlight a kindred spirit hardware haven. So I may have done my share of dumpster diving in my early start in college days. I mean, that probably surprises people. Maybe not. I cobbled a system or two together out of 4, whatever it took. Oh, super fun. Anyway, one of the things I love is learning stuff together. And you don't have to be an expert to learn together. And I feel like that is one of the things that comes out in this channel, is we're all learning together. And so we've got the newfound treasure, and we're going to explore it and then try something that we've never tried. So there's a lot of that going on, and it's a good way to go. I feel like it's very much the same confidence level I take at some of these things myself, and it's the way I learned. So
that is really cool. Yeah, I gotta say I did some. I wasn't technically dumpster diving. Most of the hardware was given to me, but I've Frankensteined a whole lot of stuff together, and that is definitely my speed.
Yeah,
I love just kind of. This is broken now. Guess what? Now we fix it. And we move forward and figure out how to make this work. I absolutely love that kind of thing.
I actually have something right here that I am now destined for pitching in the dumpster myself.
Uh-oh.
That I pulled 3 of them out of the dumpster back, seriously, when I was in college. And you're going to love it. I'm going to bring it up. We didn't plan this, by the way, folks.
His name is Oscar. He is from the garbage.
Check this thing out.
What is this?
This is a 386 luggable. Check this out.
Whoa.
And so,
dude,
it doesn't work anymore. The magic smoke definitely got let out. You can see from the keyboard cable, it's pretty fried.
Yeah, and on the bottom of the keyboard it says bad.
Bad. Yeah. Well, that's because there were 3 of them, and one of them really was bad. And I put them all together, and the keyboard from that one was good. Anyway, did that in my college days, right? And so, yeah, they were just getting pitched from a business. We gathered those, and now I do need to sadly send it to the e-waste recycler, but
it's sad.
This channel absolutely reminds me of those days, so that's why I bring that up and drag that out of here. My avalanche collapsed behind me, but whatever. But no, all seriousness. That's got like the amber screen and stuff, and
man, that's so cool.
And 5 1/4 inch floppy with the little, I want to say 20 megabyte hard drive, something like that. Full 5 1/4 inch size. Anyway, he's way more current with the stuff that he's pulling out of the dumpster bin, because he goes through like some little mini, Think Center PCs, much like the ones that you have, Leo, and he manages to finagle 3 of those out of there, and then he turns it into Kubernetes cluster, which I thought was cool.
That is really cool. I absolutely love that kind of thing. Because that's what I was talking about. That's what was what I was going through. I guess this was the late 90s, and there were I don't know, maybe about 12 machines that were in various states of operation, and I ended up making 5 fully operational machines out of them. With like dual drives and all kinds of stuff. So I mean, out of 12 coming to 5 doesn't sound that great, but they were pretty beastly machines back in the day.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that was one of the coolest projects I did, just right as I was getting my tech start, kind of figuring out what all this stuff was, how it all worked. Learning how to use Xcopy and bypass using the floppy and CD to install Windows and stuff. That was actually really, really cool. And that's probably why I'm here. One of the reasons that I'm here is people that had faith in me enough to let me do weird stuff like that.
Yep. Yeah, very similar for me as well. So, but like, not everything is Linux and open source on the channel, but it's very technology oriented, and I think enough of it is Linux and open source that everyone will find some value of things.
We get a pass.
Yeah.
He gets a pass.
This is good stuff. So stay curious. Check out Hardware Haven on YouTube and the Discord server that they have. Links will be in the show notes.
Last focus. We promised you something different, right? We said the app focus was not quite going to be an app focus this time. And we're going to see exactly what I'm talking about when I say that I'm pretty sure this whole Gentoo thing is going to last us to the end of the season. It absolutely will. We'll get to that point. This is Gentoo Focus.
Gentoo Focus.
Let's focus on Gentoo. Dan, you're checking in.
Yep.
You have already rocketed past me as far as what you've been able to do with the system. I mean, you've got a full-on GUI. You've got things happening. Like, you can use this as an everyday kind of system.
I got a portable machine that I can take places and do stuff with. Yeah, absolutely, in GUI fashion. So that's pretty cool.
That is not me, folks. Not yet.
Well, you'll get there. Like, I think you're getting closer every time. So that's cool. Once I get started on a project, I have a hard time letting go until I'm to a satisfied point.
Oh yeah,
but
yeah, I get that.
I'm never really satisfied, so I mean, I'm always tinkering on stuff. But anyway, updates are going well on Old Tater Top. I think I mentioned that I'm testing with Gentoo testing.
Yeah. That's what I mean.
It's like cutting edge stuff here. So
you're gonna. This is my favorite thing about this, is that there are gonna be 2 sides to this Gentoo Focus, this Gentoo check-in. There's going to be the bleeding edge. I'm testing all the weird stuff and just having fun with it kind of thing. And the other end of that is gonna be, I'm still knee deep in the handbook, kind of figuring things out. And what does this mean, and why did it break?
Honestly, the way I'm doing it with the Gentoo testing thing, it feels a lot like Arch, at least as far as the way updates come down. You know, in a way I can choose when that happens and all of that stuff, so I can work around any potential issues that I'm paying attention to in the packages that I'm using, if I pay attention. And so, yeah, now that things are set up and working, it's just updating, and I can do that when I know I want to get something that's come down. Here's a couple of things that I mentioned, I think, on the live stream, and maybe even in the last episode, but potentially some things I didn't too. So this is what I found useful. Last time I mentioned to use the handbook when setting things up, especially the compile flags and whatnot. It's pretty important, so I thought I definitely wanted to mention that one again. The handbook is very helpful.
I'll double down on that too, but I will say I've got some issues.
Yeah, it's not perfect, and it's not everything, and sometimes you need to go beyond what just the handbook is telling you, but it is a handbook and it is a guide to get you sort of on the right track. And it does that. It does that. So do use that. Here's a big one that I've found personally. The package naming is very different.
Yes.
Packages use a category and then a package name type of convention. So to help ease things for you when you're looking for stuff, you can do the search in the command line, but I think using packages.gentoo.org is a good way to go to search for your thing. It's very, very clean looking, simple enough and fast enough that I like just have a web browser there so you can search out the things that you want to install.
And being able to control F if there's a bunch of stuff that shows up that is similarly named or something like that really helps out.
Right.
I'll definitely agree on this one too.
Yeah, you can totally use a merge-s and then the expression in a regular type expression if you want to search for stuff on the command line. Or just, emerge-s and what you think the package is named or something in the package. You can put that stuff in there and it'll spit out a whole bunch of stuff in your face. But it isn't always as nice and clean looking. So I think the webpage is good, especially for new people. Here's one that isn't huge, but something to watch out for is pay attention to the eSelect news. After you've done updates or installing packages. Before
you do them.
Well, before or sometimes after. So, because sometimes actions are, you have to follow up with other things after you've done some of these. So the eSelect news can help tell you, like you need to run, like some hooks aren't automatic like they are in other package managers. So if it's not, it'll tell you what things you need to do to enable them, especially like services and stuff. If you need to enable some services, it'll give you the RC, commands to go update that and make sure your service is now running, because you installed it and you think, oh, why, it's not doing anything, and it's because the service isn't enabled because it told you to do that in the eSelect news.
The user merge thing is actually part of the news that I noticed. So if you're on Gentoo and you haven't done the whole user bin merge thing, that's one of those news articles that you really need to pay attention to, and if you don't, eventually you're going to get caught up.
It'll shock you.
And it's not going to be good.
Something's going to surprise you.
But this is a very old style way of dealing with, I think, administration, and I think it is kind of refreshing to kind of go back to that kind of thing where you don't have to necessarily have a web page to tell you about things and forget to go. Like, this is part of the command line. It's part of just the general administration style.
That's a good way to put it.
Gentoo, and I like it. I like having it there, right where I'm doing the work. I can also check what I need to be doing later on. Right,
I agree. No,
that's cool.
It is pretty cool and important to follow up. If you have any follow up action items. So, I don't know. I don't think I mentioned that there's a lot of reading in Gentoo, but there is. So make sure to do it. Yeah. Full confession. This will shock everyone. I'm a tinkerer.
No.
Yeah, okay. So that doesn't shock anybody. But since I like to experiment, I thought the next experiment that I'm going to partake in here on Little Old Tater Top is maybe treat it a little better and put something a little lighter on it. And it's all done. It took less time than I thought it was going to. It's kind of great. I thought it would still be going when we started recording, but it was pretty much all done just about the time we did start recording. So that's pretty cool. So I added LXQt because I'm gonna put it alongside my Plasma install. Those things can kind of co-mingle pretty nicely. Typically,
well, the Qt base underneath is similar, and then Plasma and LXQt kind of grow off of that.
Yeah, I needed to do some finagling as far as some settings, but for the most part, they'll commingle just fine. So I'm good with
until the Qt6 change.
Yeah, and that's coming too. But
no, boy,
yeah. Well, everything will have to get compiled together anyway, so it should work.
I feel like that's going to happen before the season's out. So we might finally hear. Yeah, I blew it all up.
Yeah, we might. Anyway, it wasn't a big install. There was only like 40 packages extra to install from what I saw before it started. So it wasn't huge. And it is all done. I can see as the screen is just idle over there now. But I think it'll be a fun experiment and perhaps a better choice for this woefully powered machine that I have. So full report next time we check in.
Until then, we're going on a journey. I've never done Gentoo before. I know Dan hadn't either, but I don't know how. Dan took it and just ran and was good to go. You're running desktops and everything. I was not that fast. When I started this journey, really kind of wanted to write everything down and kind of remember where I had been so that I didn't make similar mistakes. And I definitely, absolutely made a mistake. So my first effort is my first two efforts have been on Proxmox, just running a VM. I've SSH'd into my Gentoo environment and just kind of done all of the work from there. I think there are some things that the handbook doesn't cover that would be specific to Proxmox that I'm gonna just have to figure out. Maybe
makes sense.
We'll have to see. Yeah, we'll find out. Thankfully, though, Proxmox has snapshotting abilities so that you can kind of not hurt as bad when things go wrong. You can kind of roll back a little bit.
That's cloning ability too, so that's also pretty nice.
Right.
Yep.
Right. So I can kind of just make branches and decide how I want to deal with that kind of stuff. But so the first thing I did after you get in kind of to you download the Gentoo disk, you give it to Proxmox, and you boot up a system. I kept pretty much everything default. I figured that would be the easiest way to do it. We will see. But after you kind of get through the first couple of steps, which are pretty simple, I think anybody can get there, I enabled SSH so that I could do it from any desktop. I didn't have to be tied to a specific machine, or I didn't have to be in a specific spot in my house. I could be on any platform, whatever. As long as I had SSH, I could handle it. That's pretty easy. It's in the handbook. It reminds you to run it if that's how you want to deal with stuff. So that's really kind of cool. The handbook has been pretty good to me. You go through verification and partitioning of your disks just like you do in Arch, and over the next few steps, pretty much just going to be the same kind of experience that you would have in a like a true Arch install, not using the installer kind of situation.
Right.
You create your install environment. You don't have to, I think, mount MNT Gentoo. That directory already exists.
So yeah, if you're using the install disk that Gentoo provides, I
definitely am.
You can technically use any live install disk,
which is crazy to me.
Yeah, little wild, right?
Yeah,
absolutely.
But I'm keeping it as standard as possible.
That's cool
because I've already blown it up and by deviating. So
right.
First run through is going to be pretty standard. You verify networking, make sure you have an IP address and all that stuff. You verify the date. It's in UTC, so you kind of have to figure that out. Make sure that it's right. It is. If you have an IP address, it'll be fine. And then you download and extract stage 3. So stage 3 is where like the bulk of the system is, and that's what you're gonna like plop into your new environment, your install environment that you will cheroot into later. Right. Then you set some compiler info. Now this is pretty involved.
Yes.
This is the first time where you have to deviate from just rote instructions of do this, do this, do this, do this, do this. You have to make some kinds of decisions here. And it's not particularly difficult, but you do have to read a lot, and there's a base level of understanding that I think is kind of expected to happen. So I set some compiler information. I just did march native, which meant that it would just kind of figure it out itself. It would auto-select based off of whatever the hardware it's on. I'm trusting it to do that, and that seemed to work okay. By default, O2 is one of the compiler options that you're going to be using. I know we had covered on the show last season O3 and how that would have some impact on speed.
Yeah, I think Clear Linux had switched everything.
They've been using
by default.
Yeah, O3. So Gentoo still has some caveats about it, so I didn't want to break anything worse. So I stuck with O2, and then pipe is another option that I just left alone. And it did mention in the handbook that GCC might die if the system is low memory. I don't know what low memory actually is. The handbook doesn't define what low memory is. So my question to the handbook is 4 gigabytes low? Because that's what I gave to my VM. And
that's what I have in Tatertop, so there you go.
Right. And it turns out, using context clues later on in the handbook, yes is the answer. Because it has some kind of guidance on how many jobs you should be able to run. And on 4 gigs, 1 job, turns out. Just 1.
Yes.
Because 2 gigs per job is kind of the knowledge there. So I'm like, all right, fine.
Normally you'd pin a job to a CPU that you have available as well. But they did mention the low memory limitation as far as having the number of jobs that you want to assign these things to. You got to leave a little space for the system to run.
Right.
In addition to the jobs that it's doing, right?
So I made sure a little later on there's a make opts option, and I made sure to set it to J1 for jobs, 1 job, just 1 job. I
did this as well, just so you know.
I don't think it took, actually, because as text was flying by, it was like 2 jobs, and I'm like, but I have swap, so okay, that's cool.
Yeah, that's the other thing. Yep.
So you continue going through the process. You choose your mirrors. I chose, I think, Georgia. There were some other places, but Georgia I was like, that's close enough. It's fine. So the gentoo.conf file has examples of repos and all of that kind of stuff in user share. So we went through that entire process. I copied DNS configuration to the install environment so that after the reboot, I would still have internet.
Yeah, well, at least name service.
Right, yeah. Oh, true. Yeah, actually, the last step, which is many steps from now, I made sure I had the rest of the IP addressing and everything else going on. But as you can see, as you can see, and as you will see, it is very involved. I think there's more steps in a Gentoo install than an Arch install. So like we've gone beyond since about step 7 here. We've gone way beyond what an Arch system would require you.
Arch has some scripts that do some of this stuff for you automatically, right?
Right. So to anybody that has ever said Gentoo is easy, you're wrong. There's been a lot of attention to detail, which for a lot of people is not easy. And
that's true.
There has been a lot of configuration and contexting that is just very difficult for a lot of folks. So I mean, I am a very technical person. I can get through pretty much just about anything. I know I will get through Gentoo. Yeah. And then, so after you mount all that stuff manually, you root into the environment, then you source profile, and then you add yourself a bash prompt. So that kind of stuff is optional. You don't have to add the bash prompt, but it reminds you that you're in a root environment. And then when you something like if you type in exit, you're out of the root environment, and now you're back into the live system.
Right.
So it helps. But the thing is that, like, if your SSH session, in my case, if it ever fails or stops, you have to do it all again. So you have to get back into the root. You have to source the file again.
Yep, all that. Yep.
Right. So it is a bit of a slog if you can't get it done in one go. And I don't know if you know anything about me, but I tend to just hit stuff as I can. If I got 30 minutes, cool, I'll run a couple commands, make sure I got things going or whatever, and I'll walk away. And if that fails, well, Well, now you got to do it all over. Well, some of it. You got to get back into the mode again.
Yeah, you got to know where it went wrong and get back there. Yeah,
exactly. And I mean, if I hadn't had the Linux experience that I've had, if I didn't know the things that I knew, then that would be a, you know what, rip the Band-Aid off, start over again, then kind of situation for me, because it's not exactly obvious where you should start over again. So it is difficult. All right. So after you root in, you mount your boot partition so that whenever you deal with kernel-y stuff and you actually, do grubby things, that all works the way you expect it to. So you mount that. Then the handbook mentions that you should emerge WebRSync. And this builds a local repository so you know what kinds of software you have available to you. And this is when it brings in the news. This is why I was talking about the news. We didn't actually do anything. It's basically like an apt update, essentially, and kind of gives you what you're working with, the things that you can pull in, how you can deal with the system, and how you can build it from here. And one of the news items was the user merge thing. And there are options as we get into the next step of profiles that you can choose different profiles, right? Just like base system with systemd. You can do a GNOME system, a Plasma system, and you can kind of think of these as like the group installs in a Red Hat or a Fedora or a CentOS kind of system. And so it really it sets a lot of things for you. So I mean, Gentoo is not 100% build everything yourself. There are things like these profiles that will help you, make a lot of decisions for you so that you don't have to spend an extra hour trying to figure out, okay, well, if I bring in this GNOME package, what am I going to have to do, right? There's a lot of resolution to that stuff for you in these profiles, but, it doesn't mean that you can be thoughtless on this. But anyway, out of those 10 news articles, the user merge is probably the only thing that would have affected me. Because I was planning, I originally booted this thing up on a systemd, the systemd boot installation, because I was planning on having systemd, and then I realized a little later on, well, that's not the way Gentoo does things. Gentoo is an OpenRC system. Well, by default, you can do systemd, but by default,
it's there. You can do it, but it's not. You're right. It's not the default.
Right. The way that the handbook is written, it favors OpenRC, and I suppose the community favors OpenRC as well. So,
Leo, I don't mean to brag too much, but I did it both ways.
Good. Well, I plan on it. I do plan on it because I want to have the experience of both ways. I need to know how it goes. And it's not like the handbook doesn't have a systemd section. It does, and it will explain it, but you have to be very thoughtful in the steps that you take after this point, because it's like, do this, do this, do this, if you're on OpenRC. If you're on systemd, do this, do this, do this. So you do have to be very careful about.
You got to know where to branch off and do the right thing. So I did I did the one in the VM, and then I did I'm OpenRC on the laptop, just so you know.
Okay, cool. So after you do the WebRSync, you have kind of a base system to look at to kind of figure out where you're going to do that. But in the next step, you select the profile. So this is where you decide what your system is going to be. After poking around, right? It says in the handbook, after viewing the available profiles for the AMD 64 architecture, which I am on, users can select a different profile for the system. Well, what I didn't know at the time was that the handbook was not talking about right now.
Right.
It was saying that you can sometime in the future, because we haven't covered this step yet, look at the profiles and decide to build a Gentoo based on these profiles.
Right.
So I took that to mean that I could do that right now. And so I was like, you know what? My plan is to get a base system with GNOME, Gentoo, systemd. And so that's what I chose. There is a profile specifically for that.
Yep.
And so I did it 100%. And I was like, this is going to be great. Not a problem at all. So the profile itself, if you want to check for yourself, I think it was like number 17 or something for me. It was desktop GNOME systemd merged user. so that I wouldn't have to worry about merging my own user directory. It would have systemd, which is what I planned on originally. I wanted GNOME just so I could have a base system that is huge, and it would take a long time to compile, so I could have cool compiling stuff in the background like Dan does. That's cool. And I was like, that's going to be great. Well, don't do this. Don't. Because you need kernel sources in user source Linux that don't exist yet. And they don't tell you that this doesn't exist yet, even though they tell you that you can select any of the profiles. And that was my mistake. I learned this later on, but after poking around for about an hour to find out what step I missed, because I went back, dude, to the very first step. And I was like, why is it missing? Because I tried doing the @world update. Right? Yep. It tells you after you pick your profile to do an @world update. It basically, pulls in everything, compiles everything, gets everything ready for you, and then you can move on. That failed very early on. Like there were like 180 things I needed to compile. And I'm like, well, this is going to take forever. I'm going to go to bed. But before I could even leave, it was like error. And I started looking into it, and it was like, oh yeah, you don't have kernel sources in your user source Linux. And I'm like, well, why not? Why wouldn't that be there? Because it said I could change profiles, so I picked one, and I don't know.
Yeah, because you haven't gotten that far yet to be able to. Yeah,
exactly. So I wonder now why the handbook mentions it that way. Why does it say that you can select other profiles this early on without providing the links to the sources you need to look at to be successful?
I don't know, because like when you think about it, like the Arch wiki would probably give you a link to something,
and the Gentoo handbook is,
yeah, and it does in some places. You're right.
Yeah.
And so why, like you'd think, like it would give you a link to go, on a side quest, right?
If you're gonna choose any of the, bigger profiles or whatever, maybe bring in the kernel sources first. And I didn't know this at the time, so I'm poking around trying to figure it out, and I see there's no kernel sources. I'm like, well, how do you get kernel sources? So I thought I had missed a step. I have not missed a step. That was the next page. But it's a head scratcher, and I think adding a couple links would kind of alleviate that issue, right?
It
like
might.
These bigger things that you need to compile that you require kernel sources for. Maybe you need to go get the kernel sources first.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's a wiki. We could go edit it probably.
Right. So, but I mean, after an hour, I gave up. I was like, well, I don't know how to get kernel sources. Nothing has shown me how to do that up to this point, and I'm pretty sure. And so I was like, all right, fine. I'm just going to do everything exactly the way that it says and never deviate at all. So instead of using systemd, I use OpenRC. And instead of changing the profile, I'm just going to use whatever's default. And I mean, that was not my intention. I didn't want to do that. I kind of felt like I lost the game by having to go with some default.
You can switch it later, though. So that's
I know.
You can win it back.
And I'm going to start over, and I'm going to do it right. And I'm going to, but I had to fail to know what I know now. And I think I feel like there are some edits to the handbook that could be made that wouldn't require having to go through all of that pain. So anyway, so I didn't want to rock the boat. Started all the way over, did all those steps all over again on a new VM, but using the OpenRC, and the profile that was selected was the base profile. Didn't have a GUI, didn't have any of that stuff. It was just the default Linux AMD 64 17.1 profile. That was it. And so I'm not going to have a GUI at the end of my journey, which is okay, but I'll have to build it later. All right. So the very first profile, that's what I went with. I updated @world. It took about 10 minutes, but no errors. So cool.
That's good.
And then I configured licenses. Now this part of the handbook is hieroglyphics to me. I know what kind of licenses I wanted to accept, which is all of them, but there wasn't an all of them option.
There actually is.
Okay, so the way that it explained it made me kind of think that if I chose the crappiest one, that it would also accept all the previous ones. But only 2 of the options actually made that sound that way. And then in the example, there was an accept license equals --,
which is the opposite, I think, of what you were intending for.
The handbook is not clear.
It is not. So I'm just going to say, like, the dash is a negate, right?
it means not.
Not everything. And then what you have written here tells me that you've added free and binary redistributable back in. So those are the allowed.
Okay, so do I have to go in and add every license? Is that the play?
No, the idea is you can add the licenses that you want to add.
Right? Oh, I want all of them.
What you want all of them, so that would be just asterisks. And it tells you not to do that for somewhere.
For freedom reasons.
Yes, for freedom reasons. Like if you click on the link, there is a link that discusses some of this stuff a little further. And I did read into it because you're right. It is not intuitive and it isn't very straightforward.
Yeah, well, something that I didn't mention, adding the non-free firmware breaks if you don't fix this right. Like that, it won't let you do it.
Right. So
yeah, it's like go make sure you accept the correct licenses and do this again. And I'm like,
when it comes time and on like you're probably okay right on your VM because you're emulating things and it's kind of free, right? So when you go to do this on hardware, it may be a different story. And
once I start dealing with microcode and Intel and all this other stuff, because it's going to be on this machine back here,
right?
That's okay. So if I just put quote asterisk quote, that's all the licenses.
That's everything. Yes.
Okay.
And so, but do read the link. One of the things like you point out, it's a little confusing. There is a list of all of the licenses, but it isn't.
I saw that.
It isn't as concise as I'd like to see it, right? It isn't. I don't know. It just isn't as good. It isn't laid out real great. It's all there. All the information is there. I don't want to take away from that. It is all there.
Except how to accept them all in one go. That is not there in the handbook.
Right. Yeah.
Maybe I missed it, but I'm pretty sure I didn't because I stared at it.
I only know because I did that. I did what you're not supposed to do, and I added the asterisks and just said, "Yeah, give me all the licenses. I don't care."
Yeah.
I'm pragmatic.
Right, so after that, after setting that, set my time zone. You have to set your like character sets, like so ISO and UTF and all that. You have to set your locale, which is cool because then it fixes your clock and stuff. And then you have to like reset your profile again. So after all of this is done, then you have to kind of like bring in all of that character set stuff and then kind of reset your profile to acknowledge that. Installed firmware, this is where you would have messed up if you didn't select the proper licensing, because otherwise bad things happen. It's like, no, your license doesn't approve that.
Yeah, and if you've got Wi-Fi, then, well, guess what? None for you.
Yep. Then the install kernel package, which I'm not 100% sure what it does. I suppose it's like information about the kernels or something, because the next step was to install the binary kernel, which, I mean, I had already been beaten down a little bit, so I'm just like, I'm not going to compile it. I'm just going to put the binary kernel. I'll do that later. And that only took about 5 minutes.
Yeah, no, that shouldn't be too bad.
The issue that I had with updating at world would have been solved with this step, which is emerge syskernel Gentoo sources. That will pull in the kernel sources. But apparently, I found out that when I did eSelect kernel list, so it lists all of the kernels that you have, that not only did I have the Gentoo kernel, I had the Gentoo bin kernel. So just installing a kernel would have done it, and then it would have linked it and everything else to allow me to do the GNOME thing. So the GNOME thing where it said didn't have kernel sources, couldn't user source Linux, whatever it was. I probably would have been able to do it at that point. So I checked on the link, and it turns out that it was linked. The binary kernel was linked already. I didn't change it. I didn't dare change it. And then at this point, you're set to check out your UUIDs and write your fstab files, set a host name, install DHCP CD, which is what I did, and that was pretty much where I left off. I had enabled DHCP CD to start after this next reboot, but up until this point, like from this very first step, starting from the beginning, I hadn't rebooted, except to start over. But once I started over, I hadn't rebooted. But I did take a quick break to install NeoFetch so that I could have that in the show all day.
That's cool. That's cool.
Yeah, wherever it is. I can't tell where that camera's
Yeah,
looking
you're
at,
pointing at it. Yeah, you're good.
Yeah. So, so that's kind of where I left off, man. But that's a lot.
It is a lot.
So again, to recap, that is not easy. If you are blindly following the handbook, you can probably do it. But man, there's going to be a good couple of times where the handbook is not exactly clear in which choice you should make or what you should do.
It's just to point you in a direction.
Yeah.
And you have to make some choices. Sometimes they're hard choices because they could be things that you don't know necessarily. You just don't think about how your system is unique. Because they all are unique. And, the processor and all of the components that make it up, especially when you're doing a laptop. If you built your desktop, you probably...
It'd be easier to figure it out.
You got a really good idea of what went into that. That laptop, you have no idea the components necessarily, how they shipped off the factory line. Only the engineers do, so...
Yeah, exactly.
It can make it a little tricky. If you've been through some other Linux things, you may know more information about your machine.
I feel like that's only if you had like that wonky Wi-Fi card where you had to bring in a kernel module yourself.
Right.
You might know the name of the kernel module so that when you're running Gentoo, you'd be like, oh yeah, I do need a kernel module for this.
Right. Or my touchpad is something weird and it's a Synaptic special thing or something, right? You probably would have encountered that elsewhere.
Yep. Don't forget to recompile your kernel after that one. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It is a whole lot more involved than Arch. And it's definitely more involved than any other distribution I've ever run. I mean, Slackware I feel like has a learning curve, but it ain't like this. And Arch as well. If you're going through not the Arch installer, you're doing it by hand. There's a learning curve there too, but still, it's not like this. So
and we've talked about this.
Yeah, Void too. Yeah.
Void and Alpine and
I failed on live stream with Alpine, but I was still able to get back up on that horse and get Alpine going within an hour. So, but Gentoo is taking multiple sessions of very thoughtful consideration of every single step, just simply because I'd already blown it up once. I'm trying not to do that again. And I'm learning, right? Like there's a lot to learn. There's a lot to understand. And, I'm picking a lot of that up. But yeah, no one can say this is easy.
It is not easy, but you are just about over a hump where things just start to kind of, get into a maintenance mode, if you will.
Cool.
And it's a little more like you're just doing maintenance to your system, not trying to build it up. And so you've got it built up, and it just keeps itself going a little bit.
Yeah, I feel like now that I have kernel sources, I could switch profiles using the eSelect thing, and then just do the update at world thing.
Yep.
And it should just do it. Because I have.
You might need to add some. So you might need to add some meta packages or whatever, like based on things that you might want. So like one of the things I bumped into.
But I would get a base GNOME system, right?
Yeah, probably. Like, so one of the things I bumped into with the Plasma install, right, is it installs Plasma just fine. But you didn't get any of the KDE apps unless you told it to.
Okay, yeah, and that's something I can, yeah.
You're right. You get booted into it, but you don't have console.
And that's cool because
but you figure it out, right? I mean, it's it's a KDE app. Oh, it didn't install any of the KDE apps. I didn't tell it to do that meta package. In my mind, I was thinking, well, I don't need all of the KDE apps to get going. Not thinking that
console would have been one of them.
Would have been one of them. I would have thought that would have went with the base system, but it doesn't. It just isn't.
Yeah.
So I mean, it is what it is.
And that's cool. Those are situations that I can figure out. Yeah, it's when the information is missing that it kind of it's harder to sidestep. Turns out you got to go further in the handbook to figure out that you need to go back in the handbook to figure out what the situation actually was. But I got it now. I think I can. I think we're as you mentioned. It looked like I was on the home stretch, so I think we're going to be okay. Probably by the next one of these, I'll have a whole lot less to say. and a whole lot more to report. I don't know. It's probably going to change my opinion about Gentoo by the end of all of this, but I don't know what into. It's going to change it, but I don't know to what.
I'm not going to tell you where mine's going.
Okay.
But I will say, so one of the other things is early on, I think we were just barely starting Gentoo here. Joshua Lee,
yes,
who is one of our followers, but also you'll find him over on
doing
the
Gentoo
Linux
things.
Cast. Well, he does Gentoo things, but he's also on the Linux Cast. You can watch him over there. He gave us some tips, and I've intentionally sandbagged some of those. I'll save them for later.
Cool.
So we're maybe halfway down his list. I'm not sure. I haven't really been keeping tabs, but I'll look them all over. And certainly if there's any other ones that I don't bump into myself, I will mention his info. So that brings us to next time, though. Next time, we're going to talk about the history of the immutable Fedora desktop options. Like we talked about earlier, the Fedora Silverblue, Kinoite, Saracea, and a few thoughts and whatever else we can cram into the show. So, in between shows, please catch us on Twitter, Mastodon, Telegram, Matrix, Discord, Lemmy, whatever else. Just give us your suggestions on our subreddit and join the conversation. Please talk to us, give us more ideas, and all of the links and show notes on linuxuserspace.show. So, Leo, where can we find you?
Oh, you can find me over on the Twitter X thing at Leo Chavez. And I know, but it's more official every day. And at Leo Chavez at mastodon.social if you like to be a little more free.
And you can find me at KC2BZ on the little former Bluebird place, X, whatever we're calling that. And also at KC2BZ at mastodon.social. I'm there too.
Cool.
Join us in 2 weeks when we return to the Linux user space.
Bye. So the way that the handbook kind of mentions this dep clean thing, which is basically like apt auto remove and stuff, right? Like it gets rid of the cruft that was left over from previous updates.
And it also gets rid of some of the build, dependency things. It cleans some of that stuff out too that you use to build things that you don't need to run your system.
Right. So the way that it makes it sound like you should run it, but at the current state of the system, you don't need to. And it will specifically tell you, shouldn't have done this. And I was like, all right, cool. I'll keep that in my back pocket for maybe in a week or two. But, anyway.
I think you just build up cruft if you don't do it. I don't know. It probably doesn't hurt you.
So in the next kernel that comes down, I should run it. So it gets rid of the not the previous one, but the previous kernel.
Yeah, because you want a couple. You don't want 5.
Exactly. Yeah, because you want to fall back to one just in case, right?
Right.